more of Congressman Scalise in the hallways. Let's bring in Wyoming Republican Senator John Barrasso. Senator, great to have you here. You know, you listen to all of this, you take it all in, you see the CDC's statement on this uncommon practice or not routine practice to involve the teachers' unions. You really hate to think, looking back at what happened to America's children during this pandemic, and to think that there was anything other than what was promised, the science behind the decisions that were made that affected their lives.
Well, it's heartbreaking to know what happened to the students all around the country in terms of their mental health, their educational advancement. And when we see now that the teachers union, the radical teachers union, has been calling the shots for the Center for Disease Control, it is very, very concerning. Calling the shots to the point of actually rewriting the guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control. And I'm talking about teachers' unions here. Most teachers want to teach. We opened our schools early in Wyoming. We did it smartly. We did it safely. But the teachers' unions have been the #1 roadblock during COVID to the education of the children of America. They have contributed millions of dollars to Joe Biden's election campaign. They have him in their pocket. And this administration dances to their tune. That's why schools stayed closed so long.
You know, Senator, a little more of the information that Hillary Vaughn divined from the CDC. They did consult with the National Governors Association, Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, some school associations, Council of Chief State School Officers, the National School Board Association, which, of course, we remember famously from the domestic terrorism letter. But the Republicans in this report did uncover some interesting emails, including one from Chris Jones, who's with the Communications Department of the CDC, to Rochelle Walensky and one of the CDC officials about giving the unions an early heads up on what the policy was going to be. It said, quote, Greta and team will reach out to the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, this evening to set up a technical discussion tomorrow with both groups to talk through the CDC operational strategy targeting 11:30 a.m. so they have time to digest prior to the 2 p.m. release. The rest of us had to wait until 2 o'clock to hear it all, yet it appears as though these unions were intimately involved.
The unions have been intimately involved in controlling this administration in terms of all of the dollars that taxpayers sent to the schools so the schools could open. In that whole list you read, though, John, I didn't hear parents being asked about. I didn't hear students being asked about whether they were grade school, high school, going on. But why didn't we involve parents very early on? Because there's more to just the building. It's the education of these young people, their opportunities that have been crushed, their loss of potential, all of these things. Any parent, and I have children, they're not young children anymore. I know what it was like with a parent with children in school. Parents couldn't go to work during COVID because the kids were at school, at home.
Yeah.
What really, I think, brought about so much concern by parents is they watched some of these Zoom calls, education, said, this is what our kids are learning. We don't want this, which brought about the revolts, the proper revolts by parents who want much more control in what's happening in our schools.
And Sandra, I did just double-check this list, and there's not one parent group that's on that list. So the Senator's right about that.
You know, Senator, I got to ask you what you think is the future of this pandemic, where we are now, where we're going to be a few months from now, as Dr. Fauci is warning Americans should be prepared for new COVID-19 restrictions, saying, I don't want to use the word lockdowns, but referencing the recent spike in infections. We have to keep our eye on it, he says. I don't know. Where do you think we are? And is this going to get better, or are we just living a new normal?
People are fed up with what we're hearing from an administration of big government telling us how to live our lives. We are done with it. We don't need the government to be telling us. We need more lockdowns, more mandates, whether it's mask mandates, whether it's vaccine mandates. I'm a doctor. I'm pro-vaccine, but anti-mandate. There are going to be new variants of Omicron. That's going to continue to happen. People need to use common sense, need to be thoughtful in how they do things. Talk with your doctor if you have any questions, but we don't need the government coming into our lives, telling us what to do. We have been through this for 2 years now. We have many people, many who've been vaccinated, many more who have immunity because they've had COVID. My line and that from all of the people of Wyoming to the federal government, all of this is leave us alone.
In fact, President Biden said just a few minutes ago that we're at the point where it can't control our lives. So if we start going back to COVID restrictions, that kind of even goes against what the president said. New York City Mayor Eric Adams fired a bunch of emergency workers because they didn't get vaccinated, and then in recent days said if you're a professional athlete or you're an entertainer, you don't need to abide by the vaccine mandate. Here's what he said to try to explain his way out of that.
No double standard. I made a decision based on the information that I received from my health team, and I have the obligation to make those decisions on how I'm going to move my city forward. So you may consider this a double standard. I consider the analysis that I made, and I'm comfortable with my decision.
I'm reminded of an old Tom Cruise, Cuba Gooding Jr. movie. Show me the money. That's what this is. That's not about science.
Of course it's not. And this administration is full of double standards. We're seeing it now with the mayor of New York. The Biden administration has double standards. And first, he was just on saying he needs more money. The administration's asking for more money. There's still $160 billion that hasn't been spent in the so-called COVID relief bill from last year, where only 9% of the money actually went for COVID, and a lot of the money went for other liberal things. It flushed into the economy. That's how we have this 40-year high in inflation right now. But the double standards, we're seeing them at the border right now. Border agents have been fired for not being vaccinated, but yet President Biden has this open door policy allowing 2 million illegal immigrants into the country last year at a time he is firing our Border Patrol agents who are trying to enforce the law and keep us safe.
On track for another 2 million more this year, too.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Fox